Hey guys, tonight we're gonna drift back in time, into a world of bitter cold winds, roaring longships, and a society built not only on raiding and conquest, but also on the backs of those who were never meant to have a voice. This is the world of the Vikings. But no, you're not one of the warriors swinging an axe or sailing toward the horizon. You're something else entirely. You are a slave, what the Norse called a thrall, and what you're about to hear might just explain why you wouldn't survive a single year in that role. So let's set the scene. It's the early 9th century, and you're not born in a Viking village. Maybe you're Irish or Anglo-Saxon or Slavic, taken during a raid while trying to flee with your family through the smoke and chaos. You were just a child when they caught you, shoved you onto a ship, and chained you beside others, staring at the endless gray of the North Sea while trying not to vomit from the motion and fear. They didn't care if you were strong or small. What mattered was that you could be sold or used. When the ship finally reached the cold northern lands, the smell hit you first. Sweat, firewood, fermented fish, and mud. You were taken to a farmstead, a cluster of wooden buildings with steep roofs and a long central hall. That's where your new life began. But calling it a life might be generous. You weren't paid. You weren't protected. You weren't even seen as fully human. In Viking law, thralls were property like livestock, and the man who now owned you could beat you, sell you, trade you, even kill you, and no one would raise an eyebrow unless it cost someone money. The Norse sagas didn't waste ink on people like you. Your name, if you still had one, wouldn't be remembered. Your day started before the sun rose. Maybe you were sent to the fields, where you tilled frozen soil with aching fingers while your stomach gnawed with hunger. Or you were tasked with hauling buckets of water and firewood for hours, with lashes on your back if you dropped one. In the summer, you'd sweat through swarms of insects. In the winter, your fingers would crack and bleed from the frost. Warm clothes, those were for free people. You got the scraps, if that, and yet that wasn't the worst of it. What you didn't know, what no one told you when you were captured, is that Viking slavery wasn't rare or secret. It was foundational. The Viking economy thrived on it. Raids weren't always about gold or glory. They were about people, easy to transport, easy to sell, and endlessly useful. Some towns in the Norse world were hubs for human trafficking. Hedeby, for example, wasn't just a trading town. It was a marketplace for human lives. You could be exchanged for a handful of silver coins, less than the price of a good sword. Still, you had to work. You had to survive. But what did surviving mean? You slept on straw in a smoky, cold building, maybe in the barn with the animals if you weren't lucky. You shared lice, sickness, and stories in whispers with the others. Thralls like you, each with their own shattered pasts. There was no escape. The forests were thick, the language unfamiliar, and the punishment for running was brutal. If caught, you might be hobbled, tendons cut so you could never run again, or worse. Some thralls had iron collars riveted around their necks, like a permanent badge of shame. You probably weren't allowed to marry. If you had children, they were born into slavery too. They didn't get a choice. Their futures were sealed by your misfortune. And if you died young, which most did, your body might not even get a proper burial. You'd be thrown in a pit or worse, left behind if the farm moved. But here's the twist. Even if you were loyal, even if you worked harder than anyone else, your position never truly changed. Yes, some slaves could be freed, but freedom was just a new kind of survival. Former thralls, now freedmen or freedwomen, still sat at the bottom of society. You'd always be marked by your past, your name, your clothes, your lack of property. You couldn't hold high office. You couldn't own land easily. You were tolerated, maybe even pitied, but never fully accepted. And that brings us to the coldest truth of all. To the Vikings, strength was everything. Power was respected. Freedom was earned, stolen, or inherited, but never simply granted. And for thralls like you, the only way out was luck, manipulation, or slow, grinding submission over years. Most didn't make it that far. And if you're thinking maybe the women had it easier, I hate to break it to you, they didn't. Female slaves faced all the same labor, but with one more burden: exploitation. Sexual slavery was common. Viking men could take slave women as concubines, and their children would also be slaves. There was no choice, no consent, only survival. And yet you stayed silent because silence meant you lived another day. But what did life mean in a world where your voice didn't matter? You wake up to the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and not in a rush. It's not morning yet. The fire in the longhouse still smolders low. But you know it's time to work. There's no schedule for you, no choice, no break. Your body aches from yesterday, from the week before, from the months that now blur together in an endless loop of submission. You move quietly because silence is safety. The others around you begin to stir. Some older, some younger, some too broken to stand. Nobody speaks. There's no need. Everyone knows what comes next. Today, you've been assigned to the forge. The blacksmith isn't cruel, but he doesn't care if the smoke burns your eyes or if the sparks catch your skin. You're there to pump the bellows, to carry heavy, or to fetch water and tools without error. One wrong move, one broken item, and your body becomes the anvil. He's done it before. Split a boy's lip for reaching too slow, burned a girl's hand for not watching the coals. And it's not just the forge. Everywhere you go, you carry the weight of danger. Not from invaders, not from nature, but from the very people who claim to own you. Viking society may have admired warriors and explorers, but for you, it's the farmer's whip, the merchant's hand, the mistress's glare that define your world. You're not part of the sagas, they don't sing songs about thralls. And yet, ironically, you're the one holding this society together. It's you and others like you who build the ships, harvest the crops, tend the animals, spin the wool, and dig the graves. You clean the latrines, prepare the feasts, and carry the wounded home from battle. Without thralls, the Viking way of life, so admired for its strength and independence, would crack and collapse. But no one will thank you. Instead, they might brand you. Yes, brand you. Some Viking societies marked their thralls with hot iron, seared into the forehead or cheek, as if pain alone could prove ownership. These weren't isolated cases. Archaeological evidence from settlements in places like Birka and Dublin, which had thriving slave markets, shows signs of iron collars, shackles, and bone fractures from repeated labor and beatings. And here's another bitter truth. Being a Christian didn't save you either. Though Viking traders and raiders often captured monks, priests, and villagers from Christian lands, they didn't hesitate to enslave them, holy or not. They mocked their God, burned their churches, and dragged them back across the seas in chains. Religious identity offered no protection in a world driven by power and profit. Still, you hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone will set you free. This happened before. A thrall who saves his master's life. A concubine who bears a son. A loyal worker who outlives his usefulness. Manumission, the act of freeing a slave, existed in Viking law, but it wasn't common and it wasn't simple. Even if you were freed, the world wouldn't suddenly open up. You'd need a sponsor, patron, someone willing to stake their reputation on your loyalty. And if they died, you might be re-enslaved, because your freedom wasn't absolute, it was conditional. A legal shadow. One wrong step and the old chains return. And if you think things couldn't get worse, remember the raids. Slaves weren't just captured in raids, they were taken on raids. As a thrall, you could be brought along to row the ship, carry loot, dig graves for fallen warriors, or serve as human shields. If you died in battle, no one would remember your name. If you survived, you might be rewarded with less pain, but never with freedom. You were expendable, and yet some thralls resisted. History tells us of rare moments, brief, flickering, when slaves rebelled or ran. There were whispers in the sagas, rumors in the oral histories. One tale tells of a slave who killed his master in the dead of night and escaped into the forest, never to be seen again. Another tells of a freedwoman who used her knowledge of herbs to slowly poison the family who once owned her. But these were the exceptions, not the rule, because the forests held wolves, the seas held storms, and society held memories. If you were caught, your punishment would be legendary. Mutilation, hanging, sacrifice. Yes, sacrifice. In some Norse rituals, slaves were killed to honor the gods, buried alive in ships with dead chieftains, slain during feasts to bless a harvest, hung from sacred trees in grim offerings. Archaeological digs at sites like Uppsala in Sweden and Oseberg in Norway have uncovered bodies with signs of ritual death. Some believed to be thralls, offered like livestock to Odin or Freyr. So you didn't speak, you didn't run, you just endured. You did what you were told, hoping for one more meal, one less beating, one quiet night. But hope was dangerous too, because in the world of the Vikings, a thrall's hope wasn't a path to freedom. It was a tool of survival, a trick of the mind, a flickering candle in the dark halls of power. And the dark was always waiting. The days grow shorter, winter approaches, and with it, a whole new level of misery. You thought the summer was hard, working through heat and swarms of flies, but the cold is something else entirely. It doesn't care how strong you are or how many layers of rags you wear. It cuts into your bones like a blade, and it stays there. The Viking world is not forgiving in winter, and if you're a thrall, it's even worse. While the freemen gather around the fire inside the longhouse, trading stories and passing around cups of mead, you're outside, cutting firewood with cracked hands that barely grip the axe. You're sent into the forest alone, dragging back branches through snow that reaches your knees, your legs trembling with every step, your face numb. And when the axe slips and splits the skin across your knuckles, there's no bandage waiting. Just more work, more silence, more cold. Inside the longhouse, you're not completely excluded, but you're not welcome either. You sit near the door, far from the heat of the central hearth. The smoke stings your eyes, and the smell of roasted meat makes your stomach twist. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You serve the food, clean the bowls, sweep the floor. And when the laughter grows loud and the drinking gets heavier, you tense, because that's when the danger rises. Drunken masters are the worst kind. The Norse celebrated feasts like Yule and Blot, and those nights, the rules blurred. You could be ordered to sing, to dance, to serve in humiliating ways. Some slaves were mocked for sport, made to wear strange clothes, or even forced to fight each other for entertainment. The humiliation wasn't always physical. It could be slow, drawn out, a quiet reminder that you were never going to be one of them. You learned quickly that dignity is a luxury you can't afford. And still, you obeyed, because there were always new threats. A new master, a new overseer, a new punishment for an old mistake. Some thralls were moved between owners like livestock. You could wake up one morning and be told you're being traded, sold to someone in another village, another island, another land altogether. You'd be handed off like a tool. No farewell, no rights, just a nod from one freeman to another and a chain around your wrist. And in certain cases, that trade would take you far beyond the fjords. Viking trade routes reached across Europe and into the Islamic world. Slaves captured from the British Isles, the Baltics, and Eastern Europe were sold as far south as Constantinople and Baghdad. If you were young and healthy, especially if you were a woman or a boy, you could be packed onto a ship, sold through middlemen, and end up in a culture you couldn't even name, where no one spoke your language and no one cared where you came from. Imagine that. You were born in Ireland, raised in fear, taken by sea, worked on a Norwegian farm for 2 years, then traded to a Rus merchant in Kiev, and from there sold down the Dnieper River until you reached the walls of a foreign city glowing with golden domes and strange music. And all that time, no one asked your name. No one even needed it. And it wasn't just the body that broke. It was the mind. The Norse didn't care much for mental suffering. If you were quiet, withdrawn, or despondent, it was considered laziness, weakness. A slave who didn't smile or speak could be punished for it. A slave who cried too often could be accused of bringing bad luck. Even your emotions weren't yours to control. And if your spirit collapsed entirely, if you stopped eating, stopped moving, they wouldn't help you. They'd beat you until you got up, and if you didn't, they'd leave you to die. Your body would be dragged away and dumped beyond the farmstead. No stone, no grave, no song, just cold earth. Some tried to resist by holding on to their cultures. A Slavic thrall might mutter prayers to old gods beneath their breath. An Irish Christian might secretly carve a cross into the wood of a feeding trough. But if these small rebellions were discovered, they could be met with cruelty. The Norse were not always tolerant of foreign beliefs, especially if they challenged the dominance of Odin, Thor, or Freya. So you hid your past. You stopped remembering your language. You forgot your family's faces. You erased the sound of your real name from your mind, until only the name your master gave you remained. A nickname, a number, a word that didn't mean anything, except that you belonged to someone else. And sometimes you wondered, was there a better place? Some slaves dreamed of Iceland or Greenland, where the social rules were different, where slavery still existed, but sometimes, just sometimes, the lines between thrall and freeman blurred. But even there, life was hard. Cold, isolated, and always at the mercy of your master. Still, you hoped. Not because hope made sense, but because it was the only thing no one had taken, yet. But deep down, you knew that in this world, there was no escape, only endurance. And even that had a limit. The night is long, and the winds howl louder than the wolves beyond the treeline. You lie on your side in the straw listening, not just to the wind, but to the footsteps above you, to the shifting wood of the beams, to the muttered words of your masters drifting through the cracks in the wall. You've learned to listen like this. You've had to. In a world where you're invisible, knowledge becomes your only defense. You know the rhythm of their boots. You know the sound of the bucket when it's filled too low. That means someone's in a foul mood. You can smell the difference between morning bread and stale scraps. You can even predict, with eerie precision, when someone is about to strike you. Not from rage, but from habit. The blow doesn't need a reason, only an opportunity. There's no court, no trial, no explanation. If a free Viking accuses you of theft, of laziness, of anything at all, you don't get to speak. You don't get to explain. You're punished, first and harshly. Guilt is assumed. Your body is the confession. A broken finger, a cracked rib, a missing tooth. They don't need a story. They are the story. And while they feast on smoked meat and honey drink, you chew on barley porridge that tastes of ash. If it's a feast day, maybe you get a bone. Something to suck clean in the shadows while the laughter echoes from the firelit hall. It's strange how hunger changes you. It doesn't just hollow your stomach. It changes the way you think, the way you move, the way you dream. You stop imagining escape. You stop imagining tomorrow. You begin to measure time in meals and beatings and the space between chores. Sometimes you forget the sound of your native tongue. You remember words, yes, but they no longer feel like yours. You hear them in dreams and wonder if you ever really spoke them. The Norse language becomes your prison now, sharp and cold, filled with words for obedience and silence, for commands and punishment, but no words for justice. And then one day a visitor arrives. He wears a heavy cloak, adorned with foreign beads and a polished bronze brooch. He's come to trade. You see him speak with your master, voice low, gestures wide. You know this dance. You've seen it before. They're not trading cattle this time. They're trading you. By dusk, you are shackled again. The journey is rough. Northward, along frozen paths, over jagged hills and across narrow rivers covered in brittle ice. No one speaks to you. The new master doesn't need to know your name. He only wants your labor. At night, they bind you to a cart wheel and leave you under the stars with nothing but frost for warmth. This time, you're sent to a coastal village. The smaller, harsher. The air is soaked with brine, and gulls circle endlessly overhead. Here, you carry barrels of herring, scrape barnacles from ship hulls, and sleep inside a cold wooden shed next to rusted tools and moldy ropes. Every day is the same, and yet each day takes something different from you. But it's here that you meet someone new. Another thrall, older, slower. His face is weathered like ancient leather, and his hands tremble, but his eyes are sharp. He watches everything. One night, when the overseer is gone, he leans over and whispers. Not words of hope or escape, but something stranger. He tells you about the slave graves, not the ones marked with stones, but the pits behind the village, where bodies are stacked like wood, nameless and forgotten. He's seen them, dug them, covered them with just enough dirt to hide the shame. And then, as he speaks, he tells you something colder than the air outside. You're lucky if they bury you at all, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes they tie you to a post and leave you on the rocks for the tide to take. A punishment for trying to run, a warning to others. And yet you listen, you memorize every word, because even horror is better than silence. At least it means someone remembers. Someone knows what's really happening to people like you. And then there's a new whisper, a rumor, that in the east, far across the rivers, some slaves have carved out villages of their own, that they've escaped and built hidden settlements, protected by thick woods and loyal kin, that the masters fear them, that the freemen don't speak of them, but they exist. The old thrall calls it a myth, a lie born from desperate minds, but still something stirs in you, not quite belief, not quite defiance, just a flicker, a memory of what it was like to have a future. And then it fades because in the morning you are ordered to clean the outhouse trench. You lower yourself into the pit, shovel in hand, the stench rising in waves that make your vision blur. Your skin burns, your lungs sting. You swallow bile and push forward, because there's no one to take your place. That night, no one speaks. The old thrall doesn't even look at you. And somewhere far beyond the cliffs, a longship sets sail, carrying warriors to lands you'll never see. The seasons turn again, and you find yourself trapped in a cycle with no end. Each day blends into the next, marked only by the unchanging tasks and the relentless weight of ownership pressing down on your soul. You learn the meaning of fear without hope, the kind that sinks into your bones, colder than the harshest winter, and lingers long after the pain fades. One morning, a change stirs in the air. Your master speaks in hushed tones with men you don't know. They bring weapons, shining axes, long swords with intricate designs, shields emblazoned with fierce beasts. They laugh and shout, drink from horns full of ale, and prepare for a raid. You watch silently, your hands trembling, knowing that the coming days will decide not only their fate but yours as well. Raids are the bloodline of Viking power. They travel across coasts and rivers, striking suddenly, taking what they want, and disappearing like ghosts. For free warriors, it's a chance for glory, riches, and honor. For slaves, it's a nightmare. You are not a warrior. You are a tool. You will be pressed into service to carry loot, row ships, dig graves for fallen men, and if you are unlucky, serve as shields in the heat of battle. Death is a constant shadow, not just from enemies, but from your own side, where discipline is brutal and mercy almost non-existent. You remember the stories from your youth, tales whispered in the shadows about those who resisted, who ran, who fought back. Most ended in blood and chains or worse. The forest is vast, but so is the reach of your captors. There is no sanctuary for a thrall, only fleeting moments of desperation and fleeting dreams. The night before the raid, you sit alone by the shore, watching the moon's silver reflection dance on the waves. The sea smells of salt and mystery, but it promises nothing. You wonder if you will return, or if the tide will claim you forever. When the dawn breaks, the longships glide silently through the mist, their dragon-headed prows cutting through the water like knives. You grip the oar, muscles burning, heart pounding, every breath heavy with fear. Around you, men shout commands, sing ancient songs, and sharpen blades. You say nothing. You wonder if the gods watch over you, or if you're already forgotten. The raid is chaos incarnate. You haul heavy bags filled with stolen goods, your back aching under the weight. Screams echo through burning villages. The clash of steel rings in your ears. You see faces twisted with terror, women clutching children, elders begging for mercy. The warriors laugh, drink, and pillage. You move like a shadow, unseen and unvalued. When the fighting ends, the survivors count their spoils. The warriors feast, drink, and boast, but you are left to tend to the dead and wounded. Your hands tremble as you drag bodies into shallow graves, the earth cold and unyielding beneath your fingers. The faces of those you bury haunt your dreams, their silent accusations heavier than any chain. Sometimes you wonder if your own grave is waiting, but there is no time to mourn. The ships return home, laden with loot and prisoners. Among the captives, you recognize faces, some from your own distant past, some new. They will join you in servitude, their futures erased like yours. The cycle continues. At home, The master praises the warriors but ignores the slaves. You hear talk of upcoming feasts and celebrations, of gifts to be given to favored men and women. Your reward is silence. Your fate, labor. You long for freedom, but you know it is a distant dream, whispered only in the darkest corners of your mind. Yet, even in the deepest despair, the human spirit clings to hope, because without it, survival is impossible. The days stretch long, cold, and unforgiving as winter settles in deeper than before. You wake to the biting chill that seeps through the thin wooden walls of the barn where you sleep, and the damp straw beneath you feels as cold as stone. Your breath rises in misty clouds, disappearing into the gray dawn as you pull your ragged cloak tighter around your shoulders, trying to stave off the relentless cold that threatens to freeze not only your body but your very will to live. The work is endless and merciless. Your hands, cracked and bleeding from constant labor, grip the rough tools of the farmstead. Axes to chop wood, shovels to clear snow, heavy buckets to haul frozen water from the well. Your fingers numb and stiff, barely able to grasp the handles properly, and yet you dare not falter. A slip, a pause, a hesitation could bring the lash, the blow, the wrath of those who own you. You move in silence, a ghost among shadows, your every step measured, every breath held. At mealtimes, you sit apart, huddled with the other thralls who share your fate, eating sparse portions of black bread and watery broth that barely quell the gnawing hunger inside. You watch the freemen feasting by the fire in the longhouse, their faces flushed with warmth and laughter, voices loud and strong, their hands wrapped around cups of thick, sweet mead. They speak of battles, of honor, of the gods, while you swallow your shame with each bitter bite. Some nights, when the wind howls louder than the wolves beyond the hills, and the sky is cloaked in a heavy blanket of clouds, you lie awake listening to the distant songs carried on the air, songs of glory and conquest sung by those who will never know chains. You think of your own past, the life before capture, but the memories slip away like smoke, intangible and fading with every breath. Hope feels like a stranger here, yet there are moments when the veneer cracks, when the overseer stumbles home drunk and belligerent, slurring words and swinging fists indiscriminately, when the mistress of the house demands you dance for her amusement, her laughter cruel and cold, when a child is born to the household, a freeman's child, and you catch a glimpse of innocence that seems as distant as the sun. Your own children, if you had any, would live the same life, bound by birth to servitude, their futures as bleak and unyielding as your own. The law of the Norse world was clear. Thrall blood meant thrall fate. Freedom was not a right, but a rare and fragile gift, bestowed only in the rarest circumstances. You wonder if you will ever see such a gift. Outside the farmstead, the world is no kinder. The forests are vast and dark, filled with dangers that do not discriminate between freeman and slave. Wolves prowl the edges, their eyes gleaming in the night, while the cold gnaws at exposed skin and seeps into marrow. The rivers freeze solid, trapping fish beneath ice, and the crops wither in the frozen soil, promising hunger in the months ahead. Yet the freemen prepare. They sharpen swords, mend armor, and plan voyages to distant shores where the promise of plunder and glory beckons like a beacon. You hear whispers of England, of Francia, of lands rich with gold and soft beds, where the gods smile upon warriors and kings. And you know what that means for you. You will be left behind, or worse, taken along, not as a warrior, but as a servant, a burden, a shield. Your body will row the longships, your hands will carry the loot, your back will bear the lash if the voyage grows long and bitter. Death by drowning, starvation, or sword is as common among thralls on these journeys as among the warriors themselves. You steel yourself against the thought, for survival means acceptance. Acceptance means silence. Silence means life, and life, however brutal, is still life. As you work through the endless cold and toil, a bitter truth settles in your bones. This is the price of being a thrall in the Viking world. A price paid not in silver or glory, but in sweat, blood, and broken dreams. The world moves on around you. Raids, feasts, battles. But you remain a shadow, unseen and unremembered. And in the quiet moments, when the cold presses hardest, you realize that survival is not about strength, but about enduring the unbearable until the last breath. You hear the crack of wood under heavy boots before you see the figure approaching. It's the overseer, large, grim-faced, carrying a cruel iron rod that glints in the weak morning light. His eyes scan the group of thralls gathered outside the longhouse, lingering on faces pale with cold and hunger, searching for weakness, for a reason to punish. No one speaks. No one moves. The air hangs thick with dread as he steps forward, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "You," he says, pointing at a young man whose hands tremble as he holds a bundle of firewood. "Drop it, now." The boy obeys, the wood tumbling to the frozen ground with a dull thud. The overseer advances, raising the iron rod. A crack echoes as it strikes bare skin, followed by a cry muffled in the cold air. This is your life. Punishment without justice, pain without reason. You have learned that obedience only delays suffering. Even the smallest mistake is met with brutality, because fear is the language that keeps you in line. You see it in the eyes of your fellow thralls, the flicker of defiance quickly snuffed out by years of submission. But there is another form of cruelty less visible than the lash: neglect. You remember the wounds left untreated, the illnesses that ravage without medicine, the weak and the old left to perish in the snow. The Viking world revered strength and honor, but these ideals applied only to the free. Thralls were expendable tools. Their lives weighed only in usefulness. You catch a glimpse of an old man, his face a map of scars and hardship, who can barely stand. No one cares. He is left by the barn, curled in a heap, waiting for death to come quietly. Your own body bears its marks. Scars from the whip, blisters from endless work, teeth worn down by cold and poor diet. The ache in your joints is constant, and sometimes you wonder if your spirit will shatter before your body does. And yet, in the deepest darkness, there are moments of unexpected humanity. Sometimes, a freeman will show a flicker of kindness, a loaf of bread slipped discreetly to you, a whispered word of encouragement, a shared smile. These moments are rare and fleeting, but they remind you that you are still alive, still human beneath the chains. You learn to cherish these small mercies, because hope is a fragile flame in a world of shadows. Then one day news arrives. A neighboring chieftain has died, and with his passing comes uncertainty. The power struggles that follow ripple through the region, disrupting trade, alliances, and even the ownership of thralls. Rumors spread of slaves being freed, sold, or taken in the chaos. You listen carefully. Perhaps, just perhaps, this is a chance. But freedom in the Viking world is a double-edged sword. To be freed means to step into a world that mistrusts you, that remembers your past chains. You are free, yes, but to what end? You have no land, no wealth, no place among the freeborn. You must prove yourself constantly, live with the stigma of slavery, and face the threat of re-enslavement. Some former thralls choose exile, seeking new lands where their past holds no power. Others remain, carving out a tenuous existence at the margins of society. You weigh these options silently, knowing that any choice carries risks. As the seasons shift once more, the cycles of labor, fear, and survival continue. But within you, a quiet resolve grows. Not to fight openly, for that path leads only to death, but to endure, to observe, and perhaps to find a way beyond the chains. Because in a world ruled by steel and fear, sometimes the greatest rebellion is simply to survive. The air hangs heavy with the scent of smoke and damp earth as the village stirs awake beneath a leaden sky. You rise from the frozen straw that has been your bed for countless nights, your muscles stiff and aching from the unforgiving chill that seeps into every bone. Outside, the faint sound of distant bells tolls, marking the passage of another day in a world where time feels endless, yet each moment weighs heavier than the last. You dress in threadbare garments that offer little protection against the biting cold, their worn fabric barely shielding you from the harsh winds that sweep down from the mountains. The chores begin before the sun pierces the horizon, fetching water from the frozen well, tending to the sick animals, repairing the fences torn by winter storms. Every task is a reminder of your place, a silent declaration that you belong to this land only as a servant and nothing more. As you labor, your thoughts drift to the stories told in hushed whispers around the fire. The tales of distant lands where slavery is unknown, where men and women live free, unbound by chains or fear. These stories seem like fairy tales, impossibly distant and unreachable, yet they kindle a fragile spark within you. It is a spark you guard carefully, for hope is a dangerous thing in the world of the Vikings. The freemen gather in the longhouse, their voices rising in song and laughter, celebrating the gods and their victories. You watch from the shadows, invisible yet present, your gaze fixed on the flickering flames that dance beneath the carved beams. The smoke curls upward, carrying with it prayers and curses alike, while outside, the cold earth awaits the next cycle of toil and endurance. One evening, a traveler arrives, a merchant from faraway lands, his garments rich with colors and his eyes gleaming with stories of the world beyond the fjords. He speaks of cities where people walk without fear, where the air is warm and the earth yields abundant harvests. The freemen listen eagerly, eager to trade and expand their influence. But you hear in his words a promise you dare not voice aloud: freedom. But freedom for you is not a gift to be given lightly. It is a battle to be won, a prize to be claimed through cunning, patience, and resilience. You have seen slaves rise, though rarely and with great struggle. You have witnessed the harsh laws that bind you, the customs that keep you chained not only by iron but by fear and tradition. The gods themselves seem indifferent to your plight, their stories told in grand halls where slaves are absent. Yet, even in this bleak existence, moments of resistance flicker like embers in the dark. A whispered prayer in a forgotten tongue, a stolen morsel shared among comrades, a silent refusal to break beneath the lash. These small acts are dangerous, but they sustain the spirit in ways no chain can hold. As winter's grip tightens, you find solace in these fragments of hope, fragile as they are. The world beyond these fjords may be vast and uncertain, but within your heart, a quiet rebellion stirs, not of swords and bloodshed, but of survival and the yearning for something more than this endless servitude. And as the night deepens and the wind moans through the pines, you close your eyes, dreaming not of chains, but of freedom. The first light of dawn breaks over the fjord, casting pale gold across the icy waters that stretch endlessly before you. The world seems silent for a moment, but beneath the stillness, the harsh reality of your existence waits to pull you back into its grip. You rise again, shoulders aching from restless sleep, muscles stiff from cold, and you prepare yourself for another day bound by chains unseen but no less heavy than iron. Today, your task is to tend to the livestock, a duty as unforgiving as any battle. The animals are a lifeline to the farmstead, providing meat, milk, and wool, but they demand constant care and attention. You trudge through snow-dusted fields, your breath fogging the air, eyes fixed on the restless creatures. Their patience mirrors your own, enduring, silent, burdened by forces beyond their control. As you work, you overhear conversations among the freemen. Plans for expeditions, alliances forged and broken, the politics that swirl around the chieftain's hall. You are part of this world yet apart from it, a shadow on the periphery, invisible and voiceless. Your thoughts drift to your ancestors, to the life you once knew before the chains were placed upon you. The faces of those lost to raids and capture haunt your memory, a reminder of how quickly freedom can be stolen. The Norse valued strength, honor, and loyalty among their own, but for thralls, these ideals were hollow promises. Your loyalty was not to a cause or clan but to survival itself, a fragile thread that could snap at any moment under the weight of cruelty and neglect. One afternoon, a dispute erupts in the village. A freeman accuses another of theft, and voices rise in anger and threats. You watch as the chieftain intervenes, his presence commanding silence. Justice in this world is swift and often brutal, but it is reserved for the free. Thralls are judged by their masters or not at all. You are reminded again that your fate lies in the hands of others. That night, as the village settles into uneasy quiet, You hear whispers of rebellion far to the east, where slaves have risen against their masters. Tales speak of burning halls and broken chains, of a brief glimpse of freedom before the swords fell once more. These stories are carried on the wind like ghosts, haunting your dreams and fueling a flicker of defiance that you dare not let grow too large. Because hope is a dangerous thing. As the moon rises high, casting silver light upon the frozen earth, you find yourself pondering the cruel irony of your existence. You are both prisoner and servant, invisible yet indispensable. Your hands build the ships that carry warriors to glory. Your labor feeds the halls where your name is never spoken. Your very being sustains a society that would just as soon see you vanish. And yet, within this darkness, a small light remains. It is the unyielding human spirit, the quiet rebellion of endurance, the refusal to be broken despite the weight of chains. You carry this light with you as you move through the shadows, as you labor under cold skies, as you dream of a freedom that feels forever out of reach. For in a world ruled by steel and fear, sometimes survival itself is the greatest act of defiance. The sun barely rises above the horizon, casting a dim light that does little to warm the frozen landscape. You pull your tattered cloak tighter against the chill, your fingers numb and trembling as you prepare for the day's unrelenting toil. Around you, the village slowly stirs, the muffled sounds of life barely reaching the corners where you labor in silence, unseen and unheard. The longhouse doors creak open, and the freemen emerge, their faces flushed with sleep and drink, their voices booming as they discuss the raids and battles that fill their songs and stories. You listen quietly, memorizing the names of distant places and enemies you will never meet, the glories you will never share. Your tasks are simple but exhausting: hauling firewood, mending fences, tending the animals, and preparing the fields when the seasons allow. The rhythm of your work is unchanging, a monotonous cycle that grinds down body and spirit alike. Yet even this relentless labor is punctuated by moments of cruelty: an overseer's lash for a dropped tool, a master's glare that speaks of silent threats, a whispered warning to remember your place. You bear these without complaint, for silence is the shield that spares you the worst punishments. But even silence is not enough to protect you from the coldness of this world. You have seen others broken beyond repair, men and women who once carried hope but now shuffle through their days like ghosts, their eyes empty and their bodies mere shells. Disease and injury go untreated, and when the end comes, it is swift and unmarked. No songs are sung, no stones laid, just the cold earth to claim what was never truly theirs. Still, you cling to the smallest fragments of humanity, shared glances with other thralls, a secret prayer whispered beneath the breath, the fleeting warmth of a friendly touch in the dark. These moments remind you that you are more than property, more than labor. They kindle a fire that the cold and chains cannot extinguish. One evening, as the village gathers for a feast celebrating the winter solstice, you are summoned to serve at the long table. The air is thick with smoke and the scent of roasted meat, laughter echoing off the wooden walls. You move quickly, pouring ale and filling plates, your eyes catching the flicker of torches and the gleam of iron swords hanging from belts. Among the freemen, talk turns to new lands, mysterious islands beyond the sea, rich with resources and untapped opportunities. They speak of colonization, conquest, and settlement with a certainty born from centuries of raids and exploration. You listen, heart heavy with the knowledge that your fate is tied to their ambitions, your body the instrument of their expansion. Yet, even as the freemen dream aloud, you wonder what dreams remain for those like you. Is freedom more than a story? Is survival the only victory possible? As the feast rages on, you slip away into the cold night, the stars distant and indifferent above. Alone in the dark, you hold onto the fragile hope that one day, your chains might fall away, not by the mercy of masters, but by your own strength, persistence, and the enduring will to live. Because in a world shaped by power and fear, sometimes the greatest rebellion is simply to endure. The harsh winter begins to thaw, and with the creeping warmth comes the burden of new labor. The snow melts into muddy earth beneath your worn boots, and the air is thick with the scent of damp wood and fresh growth struggling to break free from the soil. You rise early, muscles stiff and sore from months of unending work, and prepare to face the day with the same grim determination that has kept you alive this long. Fields that once lay dormant under blankets of snow now demand attention. Clearing stones, breaking frozen ground, planting seeds that may or may not yield a harvest come autumn. The freemen oversee the work with keen eyes, barking orders and reminding you of your place in the world. You know better than to argue or complain. Obedience is the currency that buys a few moments of respite from pain. As you toil, your mind drifts to the stories told around the fire. The sagas of heroes and gods, of battles won and lost, of honor and vengeance. These tales are not for you. They belong to the free, the mighty, the conquerors. For a thrall, there are no songs sung, no names remembered. You are a shadow in the grand tapestry, a ghost whose story is never told. Yet you are indispensable. Without your labor, the ships would not be built, the fields would lie fallow, and the great halls would remain empty and cold. You are the invisible foundation upon which the Viking world is built, the silent force that enables glory and conquest. And still, your existence is dismissed as worthless, your suffering unseen. One day, a messenger arrives with news that ripples through the village. A chieftain has been slain in a distant battle, and with his death comes unrest. The balance of power shifts, alliances crumble, and the fate of many hangs uncertain. Among the chaos, some thralls find opportunities. Moments when the grip of their masters loosens, when bonds are broken, and when whispers of freedom flutter like fragile wings. You listen carefully, catching fragments of conversation about manumission, about slaves who have earned their freedom through loyalty or bravery. These stories are rare and often met with suspicion, but they kindle a cautious hope. Could you be among them one day? But hope is a dangerous thing, tempered by harsh reality. You know the risks. Attempting escape means death or worse, for yourself and those who might aid you. Betrayal is common, and trust is a luxury few can afford. The laws are clear and cruel. A runaway thrall is hunted relentlessly, returned in chains or left to perish in the wilderness. As the days lengthen and the earth warms, you continue your labor with a heavy heart. Each swing of the axe, each bucket hauled, each fence mended is a reminder of the chains that bind you. Not just of iron, but of circumstance, law, and tradition. Your body is weary, but your spirit remains unbroken, a quiet flame flickering against the dark. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the village sleeps and the world is still, you dream, not of swords or glory, but of simple things. Freedom to walk without fear, to speak without silence, to live without chains. And in those dreams, you find the strength to endure another day. The spring rains fall in relentless sheets, turning the dirt paths of the village into slick rivers of mud that cling to your feet and weigh down every step. Your clothes are soaked through, heavy with water and grime, and the chill penetrates deeper than before, biting through the thin layers that have long ceased to protect you from the elements. The world seems a cruel place, indifferent to your suffering, and every task becomes an ordeal of endurance. You rise before the sun, your body aching and your spirit weary, yet the demands of the day wait for no one. The freemen expect the fields to be tilled, the animals fed, the fires stoked, and the longhouse prepared for gatherings that celebrate gods who seem far removed from your plight. You move like a shadow, your hands blistered and cracked, your back bent under the weight of endless labor. The cold mud seeps into your boots as you trudge through the fields, planting seeds that may never grow, nurturing crops that could be stolen or destroyed in raids. The knowledge that your efforts benefit those who see you as less than human is a bitter pill, swallowed daily without complaint because survival leaves no room for protest. As the days lengthen and the sun gains strength, you observe the freemen preparing for voyages across the sea. Ships are repaired and provisioned, weapons sharpened, and warriors gathered to claim lands and riches far beyond the fjords. Their laughter and songs fill the air, a stark contrast to the silence that surrounds you. You know your role in these ventures will be servitude, rowing the longships, carrying burdens, and enduring hardships without reward. The risk of death looms as large for you as for the warriors, but without honor or glory, only suffering and invisibility. At night, the village is alive with tales of distant battles and God's favor. You listen in shadows, your mind painting pictures of lands where freedom exists, where chains are broken, and where your name might be more than a whispered secret. These thoughts sustain you, fragile and fleeting as they are. Yet, beneath this fragile hope, a darker reality presses close. Disease spreads through the village like wildfire, striking first the weak and old, the very thralls who can no longer work. They are left to die alone, their bodies discarded without ceremony. You have seen neighbors vanish, their absence marked only by an empty place at the fire. Your own body bears the marks of hardship. Scars from lashings, wounds slow to heal, and a constant ache that no rest can soothe. But you endure because to do otherwise is to surrender entirely. One day, a freeman's child falls ill, and the mistress demands a healer. You are sent to gather herbs from the forest, braving the muddy paths and cold streams. The forest is alive with the sounds of spring, birds calling, leaves rustling, and the faint trickle of water over stones. It is a brief reprieve from the harshness of the farmstead, a moment when nature offers a whisper of peace. You gather the herbs carefully, knowing that the freemen's lives depend on your success, while your own health is left to chance. The irony is not lost on you, but there is no time for bitterness, only the work. As you return, the sun breaks through the clouds, casting a warm light on the village that seems almost a promise. Yet, you know the cycles will continue: labor, punishment, survival, until the end of your days. And still, beneath the weight of chains and hardship, the ember of hope burns quietly within you, a reminder that even in darkness, light persists. The days grow longer, and the sun's warmth coaxes life from the earth. But for you, the weight of chains remains unyielding. You rise before the first light, your body aching from endless toil and nights spent on hard, cold floors. The dampness clings to your skin, a constant reminder that comfort is a luxury you will never know. The village stirs around you, alive with activity and promise for the season. Yet your place remains fixed at the bottom of the hierarchy, unseen and unheard. Today, you are tasked with repairing the boats that lie along the shore, their hulls battered by winter storms and brine-soaked waves. The work is grueling and precise, demanding strength and patience you scarcely possess. Your hands are raw and blistered, but you dare not show weakness, for any sign of frailty invites punishment. The overseer watches closely, his gaze sharp and unforgiving, ready to strike at the slightest error. As you work, your mind drifts to the distant lands spoken of in the tales, a place where the sun never sets during summer, where forests are thick and endless, and where the people live without chains. These stories are told in the Longhouse by men whose voices carry the weight of adventure and conquest. You listen, longing to believe that such freedom exists beyond the horizon. But your reality is far harsher. You are reminded daily that your worth is measured only in labor, your life expendable and your suffering ignored. The scars on your skin, the aches in your joints, and the weariness in your eyes speak of a battle fought not with swords, but with endurance and silent resistance. One evening, as the village gathers around the fire, the chieftain announces plans for a new expedition, this time to lands rumored to be rich with silver and fertile soil. Warriors cheer and raise their horns, eager for glory and wealth. You know that once again, you will be compelled to serve, rowing long hours, carrying heavy burdens, and enduring hardships that will break lesser souls. The promise of riches and honor belongs to the freeman. For you, there is only survival. As the feast continues, you steal a moment to look out toward the dark forest beyond the village, where shadows stretch and twist under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, you imagine a place untouched by chains, where the air is clean and the earth free. The thought is both a balm and a torment, reminding you of what is lost and what may never be. Yet, within the depths of your being, a quiet strength grows. It is not the strength of warriors or kings, but the strength of those who endure, who carry their pain in silence, and who find meaning in mere survival. It is the strength that has kept you alive through winters and raids, beatings and neglect, hunger and fear. In this harsh world, it is the greatest rebellion of all. The village wakes slowly beneath a sky thick with clouds, the weight of impending rain pressing on the earth as heavily as the burdens you carry. You rise from the hard bed of straw, your body stiff and sore from a restless night, muscles aching from the relentless demands of servitude. Outside, the chill hangs in the air like a shroud, seeping into your bones and reminding you that comfort is a forgotten luxury. Your day begins with the familiar tasks: fetching water from the well, chopping wood for the hearth, tending to animals whose lives depend on your care. The animals neither judge nor reward. They simply exist, caught in the same cycle of survival as you. Your hands, cracked and bleeding, move mechanically, each motion a small act of defiance against the despair that threatens to engulf you. Around you, the freemen prepare for a feast, a celebration of the gods and the passing of seasons. The longhouse fills with laughter, song, and the clatter of horns filled with mead. You watch from the shadows, a silent observer in a world that does not see you. The stories told by the fire speak of honor, conquest, and glory, words that feel as distant as the stars above. Yet, even in this world of disparity, there are moments that pierce the darkness. A child, the son of a freeman, approaches you with curious eyes, offering a piece of bread without hesitation or scorn. It is a simple gesture, but it carries a weight far greater than the gift itself. For a fleeting moment, you glimpse a world where humanity transcends birth and station, where kindness can exist without expectation. But such moments are rare. The overseer's harsh voice soon cuts through the quiet, reminding you of your place. Punishment is swift for those who falter, be it a misstep in the fields, a word spoken out of turn, or simply the failure to meet impossible expectations. You have learned that submission is the currency of survival, and resistance, however small, carries a price. As the feast reaches its peak, the chieftain stands to speak of new raids and the promise of spoils. Warriors cheer, their voices echoing in the longhouse, while you steel yourself for the inevitable. Another voyage where your life will be bargained for coin, your body pressed into service with no hope of reward. The sea calls to them, a siren's song of adventure and conquest. To you, it whispers only of toil, hunger, and the ever-present specter of death. Night falls, and with it comes a brief respite. You find a quiet corner away from prying eyes and cold judgment, where you can breathe without fear, if only for a moment. The stars above shine cold and distant, indifferent to your plight, but you trace their patterns with tired eyes, finding solace in their steady light. In the darkness, you whisper a prayer, not to gods who favor the strong, but to the fragile hope that one day your chains will fall away, not by force or violence, but by the quiet strength of endurance, the unyielding will to live, and the stubborn belief in a better tomorrow. For in a world ruled by steel and fear, survival itself is the fiercest rebellion. The dawn is gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds that promise rain but deliver only a persistent, damp chill that seeps into your bones. You rise from the straw bedding, your body aching from the constant strain, and prepare yourself for another day of endless labor. The village awakens around you. The sounds of axes chopping wood, animals stirring, and the murmurs of freemen as they begin their routines. But you move quietly, unnoticed and unvalued. Your hands are raw from the chores that never end, from mending fences battered by storms to hauling water from the well that never seems to fill. Every task is a reminder of your place, a constant assertion that you belong to this world only as a servant, a tool to be used and discarded. Yet, beneath the weariness and pain, a stubborn ember of resilience refuses to die. The overseer is a looming presence, his eyes sharp and unforgiving as he watches your every move. Punishment is swift for mistakes, whether real or imagined, and the lash is never far from his grasp. You have learned to hide your pain, to swallow your cries, and to endure in silence, for complaint only invites more suffering. Around you, the freemen prepare for an upcoming raid, a chance to claim riches and honor in distant lands. Their voices are filled with excitement and anticipation, but for you, the prospect is grim. You will be pressed into service once more, rowing the longships through icy waters, carrying heavy loads, and facing dangers that could end your life without ceremony or recognition. The thought of death does not frighten you as much as the certainty of invisibility. You wonder if your life will be remembered, if your name will ever be spoken beyond whispered tales of hardship. The gods are silent, their favor reserved for warriors and kings, while you remain in the shadows, a ghost in the story of conquest. Yet, even in this bleak existence, moments of humanity persist. A fellow thrall offers a stolen piece of bread, a small smile exchanged in the darkness, a whispered word of encouragement. These acts of kindness are lifelines, fragile threads that connect you to others who share your fate and your hope. As the village prepares for the journey ahead, you steal a moment by the shore, watching the longships rest against the misty water. The dragon-headed prows gleam in the weak light, symbols of power and terror. You imagine the cold sea swallowing you whole, but you also imagine the freedom that lies beyond the horizon, a freedom that seems as distant as the sun. The sea is a cruel mistress, demanding sacrifice without mercy. But within your heart, a quiet rebellion grows, not one of swords or bloodshed, but of endurance and unyielding will. You carry this rebellion with you as you return to your duties, to the unending cycle of labor and survival. Because sometimes, the greatest defiance is simply to live another day. The harsh winds carry the scent of salt and wood smoke as you awaken to another day in the unforgiving world of the Viking thrall. The first light barely penetrates the thick fog that blankets the village, wrapping everything in a cold, damp silence. You rise slowly, muscles stiff from the night's restless sleep on the hard straw floor, your body aching with the familiar dull pain that has become a constant companion. Each breath you take is visible in the frigid air, a reminder of your fragile existence in a land ruled by strength and fear. Your duties are clear and unrelenting. You gather firewood from the dense forest, careful to avoid the traps and pitfalls set by overseers who watch for any sign of hesitation or weakness. The trees tower above you, ancient sentinels that seem indifferent to the suffering below. You haul heavy logs back to the farmstead, your fingers raw and bleeding from the rough bark, the weight a testament to your place in the world. Around you, the freemen prepare for the next great raid, their voices loud and confident as they sharpen swords and ready ships. They speak of distant lands, rich monasteries, bustling towns, and undefended monasteries ripe for plunder. Their excitement is palpable, a stark contrast to the cold dread that coils in your stomach. For you, this journey means only more suffering, rowing through icy seas, carrying burdens heavier than your body should bear, and facing dangers without honor or hope. The overseer's eyes are never far from you, sharp and unforgiving. You know that any misstep could mean a lash or worse. The memory of past punishments lingers, a raw ache beneath your skin that flares at the slightest touch. But you endure because surrender means death in more ways than one. As the day wears on, you tend to the animals, cows, sheep, and chickens, creatures that rely on your care even as their lives are dictated by the whims of their masters. You move quietly among them, your hands gentle despite their own suffering. In the animals' eyes, you see reflections of your own captivity, living beings caught in a cycle of control and dependency. Night falls, bringing with it a chilling silence broken only by the distant howl of wolves. You find a moment of solitude beside the shore, the cold water lapping at your feet. The stars above are sharp and clear, distant lights in a dark sky, indifferent to the struggles below. You think of the free lands beyond the sea, of people who live without chains or fear. The thought is both comforting and cruel, a reminder of what has been lost and what may never be. You whisper a prayer, not to the gods of warriors and kings, but to the quiet hope that one day your chains will fall away, that your story, now hidden in shadows, will be told, that survival is not just endurance but a rebellion against the fate imposed upon you. Because in the heart of darkness, even the smallest light can blaze like a flame. The cold morning mist clings to the earth, dampening the bones of the village and the spirits of those who live within it. You rise once more from the frozen bed, muscles stiff and joints aching, your breath forming clouds in the chill air. Around you, life goes on. The quiet bustle of early chores, the muted voices of freemen preparing for the day's work. But you move like a shadow, unseen and unacknowledged. The world of the Vikings is one of stark contrasts. The fierce pride of warriors, the harsh laws of chieftains, and the invisible suffering of thralls who bear the weight of their society's ambitions. Your days are filled with labor, your nights with exhaustion, and your body is marked by scars that tell stories no one will ever hear. Today, you are assigned to repair the fences that protect the livestock from wandering predators and the ever-present threat of neighboring tribes. The wood is rough and splintered, cutting into your hands as you work beneath a gray sky that threatens rain. The overseer stands nearby, watching, ready to punish any sign of slowness or carelessness. His presence a constant reminder of the thin line between endurance and cruelty. As you work, your mind wanders to the tales told in the Longhouse, the sagas of gods and heroes, of battles won and lost, of honor and vengeance. These stories are not meant for you. They belong to the free, the mighty, the conquerors. For thralls, there are no songs sung, no names remembered. Your existence is a whisper, a shadow fading at dawn. Yet, despite the harshness, moments of kindness surface like fragile blooms in the frost. A freeman's child shares a stolen piece of bread. A fellow thrall offers a quiet word of encouragement. And in the darkest hours, you find strength in these small acts of humanity. They remind you that even in chains, the human spirit can endure. The days pass, each one a repetition of labor and survival, until news arrives of a new raid planned for the coming season. The freemen speak excitedly of the riches that await, the battles to be fought, and the glory to be won. You know that your fate is to serve once more, to row long hours in icy waters, to carry heavy loads, to endure hardship without recognition. The sea is both a pathway to fortune and a prison for those like you. As night falls, you stand alone beneath the stars, the cold wind biting through your thin clothes. You think of freedom, not as a distant dream, but as a quiet rebellion, a refusal to be broken by the weight of chains and cruelty. It is a rebellion fought in silence, in endurance, and in hope. For in a world ruled by fear and steel, survival itself is the greatest defiance. The cold wind cuts through the village like a blade, carrying with it the scent of salt and pine, a harsh reminder of the unforgiving world you inhabit. You rise before dawn, your body heavy with fatigue but driven by the relentless demands of servitude. The air is thick with the sounds of preparation. Axes biting into wood, the murmur of voices, and the steady clatter of tools against stone and timber. Your hands, cracked and raw, move with practiced efficiency. Yet each movement is a reminder of your place beneath those who claim power and honor. The overseer's gaze is ever watchful, a shadow looming over every task you undertake. His voice, sharp and unforgiving, echoes through the crisp morning air, meting out orders and threats with equal measure. You know that any lapse, no matter how small, will be punished swiftly and without mercy. The lash is a language you have come to understand well, a cruel punctuation to your days of labor and silence. Amid the toil, your thoughts drift to the distant lands you have heard whispered about in the Longhouse. Places of warmth and plenty, where the sun shines long into the evening and chains are unknown. These stories are told by men whose lives are shaped by conquest and power, tales of glory that you are forbidden to share. Yet, in the quiet moments between tasks, these stories become a fragile lifeline, a flicker of hope that sustains you through the darkest nights. You tend to the animals, creatures whose fate is intertwined with your own. Their eyes reflect a quiet resignation, mirroring the captivity you both endure. You move among them with care, your hands gentle despite the harshness of your own existence. In these moments, a fleeting sense of connection tempers the bitterness of your servitude. As the day wears on, the village buzzes with preparation for an upcoming raid, a venture that promises riches and honor for the freemen. But for you, it signifies more hardship and risk. You will be pressed into service once again, rowing through cold seas and carrying burdens heavier than your body should bear. Death waits on the horizon, as indifferent to you as it is to the warriors who sing their battle songs. Night descends, bringing a cold silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of wolves. Alone, you find a moment of solitude beside the flickering flames, your thoughts turning inward. You whisper a prayer, not to gods who favor the strong and free, but to the fragile hope that one day your chains might fall away, that your story, hidden in the shadows, will be remembered. Because in a world built on fear and strength, sometimes the quiet persistence of survival is the fiercest rebellion of all. The first light of morning barely penetrates the heavy clouds that hang low over the village, casting everything in a muted gray. You rise again from your meager bedding, muscles stiff and joints aching, your breath forming faint clouds in the chill air. The world around you stirs slowly, sounds of animals waking, the distant chopping of wood, and the murmur of voices from the freemen preparing for the day ahead. Yet, you remain a ghost among them, your presence unnoticed and unvalued. Your tasks are unchanging. Fetching water from the well, tending to the animals, repairing fences worn by winter's fury. Each laborious act is a reminder of your place in this harsh society, a tool to be used and discarded, a shadow in the grand tales of conquest and glory. The overseer's sharp gaze never strays far, a constant reminder that failure means pain, and resistance is a risk few can afford. Amid the monotony, your thoughts drift to distant lands and stories told in the longhouse. Tales of gods and heroes, of battles fought and won, of honor and vengeance. These stories are not for you, yet they linger in your mind like distant echoes, offering a fragile glimpse of a world where freedom exists. You cling to these whispers of hope, even as the weight of chains drags at your spirit. The arrival of spring brings new challenges. The fields demand preparation for planting, and the freemen's ambitions grow with the lengthening days. Plans for raids and voyages fill the air, their excitement palpable as they speak of riches to be claimed and enemies to be vanquished. You know your role is to serve, to labor without reward or recognition, rowing through icy waters and bearing burdens that sap your strength. The harsh realities of your existence are tempered only by fleeting moments of humanity. A stolen piece of bread shared in secret, a quiet word of encouragement from a fellow thrall, the brief warmth of a smile in a world cold and indifferent. These small acts sustain you, fragile threads woven into the fabric of your survival. As night falls, you find yourself alone beneath a sky heavy with stars, the cold wind whispering through the trees. You think of freedom, not as a distant dream, but as a quiet rebellion, a refusal to be broken by the relentless weight of servitude. It is a rebellion fought not with swords or shields, but with endurance, patience, and the stubborn will to live. Because sometimes, survival itself is the fiercest act of defiance. The cold winds howl through the village one last time, sweeping across frozen fields and rickety fences that have borne witness to years of hardship and endurance. You stand at the edge of the settlement, your breath visible in the frigid air, muscles trembling not just from the cold, but from the weight of a lifetime spent in chains. The world around you is both familiar and foreign, a place where survival has been a daily battle, and hope a fragile ember barely kept alive. Through countless seasons, you have endured the lash of overseers, the biting cold of endless winters, the hunger that gnaws relentlessly at your belly, and the silence that seeks to erase your very existence. You have been a shadow in the grand saga of Viking conquest, a ghost who labored without recognition, whose story was never sung in the halls of heroes. Yet you have lived, resisted, survived. The freemen celebrate victories and losses, their names etched in the sagas that will outlast them. Your name is nowhere to be found, and yet, within the quiet depths of your soul, a fierce rebellion has burned. A rebellion not of swords or shields, but of endurance and unyielding will. To survive in a world that denies your humanity is the greatest defiance. Tonight, as the firelight dances across weathered faces and the longhouse echoes with song and laughter, you watch from the shadows, knowing that your struggle, though unseen, has shaped this world. The ships that sail beyond the horizon, the halls filled with mead and tales, all bear the mark of your labor and sacrifice. Freedom may have been a distant dream, a whisper carried on the wind, but survival, your survival, stands as a testament to the strength of the human spirit. In the end, it is not the glory of battle or the honors of the mighty that endure, but the quiet courage of those who refuse to be broken. You turn away from the fire, the night enveloping you like a shroud. The stars above shine cold and distant, yet within you burns a light that no chain can extinguish. For in the darkest of times, even the smallest spark can ignite a flame that refuses to die. And so you endure,